UK nationals, it's time to take action. If you're settled in Belgium, you need to register for residency. You need to make sure you're registered for healthcare. You also need to check online that your passport is valid and renew it if you need to. And if you drive, you need to exchange your UK driving licence for a local one. Prepare for the UK transition now at gov.uk/livinginbelgium.
Ja, hallo en welkom bij de Coding Along sessie. Zeg eens allemaal goeiedag in de chat, zodat ik weet wie er aanwezig is. Yes. Muziek. Ja, ik weet dat mijn microfoon gemute was. Het was... Aha, de designer van de intro-schermen en de rest is ook aanwezig. Welkom. Oké, nu gaan we... Dit zal hopelijk ietsje beter werken dan hoe moet ik het zeggen? Dan Teams. Dus we gaan... Even mijn gsm op stil zetten, uiteraard. Dit is de Coding Along sessie. Uiteraard, die gaat opgenomen worden. Die gaat bijstaan in de playlist van Web 2. And of course, since Web 2 is English, I will now switch to English. The music is going to go away. I know. Boom. So, we're going to switch to the coding, of course. Let me check. Let's go. Okay. So, for the coding, again, we're going to see the basics of Node. We're going to use the version of Node. Let me just add the chat so that I can see the things that you guys say. Okay. Everything should be good now. So, Node basics. First exercise is installing Node and testing it out. So I'm going to go quickly over that. Again, we've done that. It doesn't matter in what folder you are working to test out Node. You can do that if you've installed it correctly. You can do that anywhere on your PC. Now I'm going to, again, for people who are not familiar with the command line, get familiar, because the moment you're working with Node, you're going to be working a lot more with the command line, especially next week. So again, I'm going to move into the tab. Let me check. I think it's session 4. Yeah, session 4. And I have my files there. Good. Now, in here, I'm going to test Node. Hop. I'm going to test Node. So, Node -v. And I have version 15 on my PC. Now, if I do npm -v, I have the version for npm. So that means it's installed. That means if I do this, Node and enter, I am in my in my REPL mode, read, evaluate, print loop. Now, it says here type.help. Let's see. We have break, we have clear, editor, exit. You can also type exit, so let's try that. Exit, and then I'm out of here. Okay, perfectly possible. So, again, Node. What is asked here? Make the sum function. Now, I have already demonstrated this, but for the purposes, because this is also recorded and coming on YouTube, write a function. So, function sum a, b, and now I'm in the function, which is denoted by the 3 dots. Of course, I'm going to return a plus b, and I'm going to close the function. I'm going to create 2 variables just to show you how it works. I can also call the function immediately. But again, 2 variables. What? I have my age and my birth year here, which is just variables. Again, they're all in memory now stored. I have the x variable, I have the y variable. If I want to execute a sum function, I can do so like this with regular parameters, or I can do so like this. Okay. So that is the Node REPL function. It's very handy to quickly test stuff But of course, you're not going to be using that a whole lot. So I'm going to Command C out. And that is basically exercise 1. Again, if there are questions, shoot them in the chat, and then I will answer them as well. I prefer you ask them during the session so that I can answer them now and that they are on the recording so that other people might know the more common questions. Good. Now that we are working for exercise 2, what is in here? I have the boardgames.json, which is the JSON file that I've explained earlier. So what is the point of the exercise? I'm going to close my terminal a bit. I'm going to close this so I have more real estate. Yes. So I have 3 board games: Gloomhaven, Food Chain Magnate, and Terra Mystica. All of them are just an object, and they are added to the file like this. So 3 properties, an object with 3 properties, and then the object in there with all the data from the board game. Now, it's been a while since I made it, so let's hope nothing goes wrong. We use one of the built-in modules, FS, which is file system. File system modules allows you to work synchronously or asynchronously with the file system on your server. Now, our server, of course, is just RPC because it's going to be running on RPC. We write a custom script, which is what I'm doing right now, to split an existing JSON file into individual files. So again, 3 games. I want 3 files with unique names. We process the data and we write new files to our operating system. Like I said, now the name of the file needs to be unique, of course. I do not have boardgame1.json, boardgame2.json. No, I want board game, the ID of the board game plus .json. So that means, for example, for Terra Mystica, I need to create a file 120677.json. Okay, that's some custom JavaScript. It's nothing, it's just a string concatenation. So let's get to work. We need the file system. Okay, I go to the documentation for file system. I have selected that in the index. If I go to the beginning, it says the file system allows interacting with the file system on POSIX functions. You don't need to know what that is. Just keep it basic. To use this module, const fs, we make a constant, and we require the module itself. Well, of course, if they say I need to do it like this, I'm going to do it like this. Now, to make sure that nothing crashes, you can just call or like launch well, nothing executes. Require does not work. Require should work. Hold on. It does not crash, which is good. What error do you get with require? If you do not have require, if the require does not work, that means that Node is not correctly installed. Because Node is the one that reads this, and if you execute it like this, then Node looks at the require keyword. He says, hey, I know this, and fs is not found is the same issue. It's Node not finding that file. Now, of course, you need to execute it like this. Your HTML page, there is no HTML page. As you can see, I have nothing else here. You do not need to, you cannot include this in an HTML page because require indeed is not known in a web browser, which is very important. In next session, we're going to see how we can pack code from Node basically into a front end, but that's not for now. So if require is not found and fs is not found, then it means either Node is not correctly installed or you're not executing the file correctly. Like I said, I just have a JavaScript file and I execute it using Node space and then the file. Okay? If that doesn't work, just follow along and then I will do individual help later. Now, why do I do this console log is because it does not crash. That means if this were to give an issue, for example, if I were to do this, fs1, I don't think fs1 exists, then I get this issue. Then I get cannot find module fs1, which is correct because fs doesn't exist. Fs is a module from Node. So if I do this, it's going to look into the whole list for Node modules, and then it should work. Okay. Now that we have that, the first step is to, again, try to have a large exercise and split it up into smaller parts. For example, what do we need to do? We need to read the file. We need to loop over the data and have like specific files saved for them, and then save the files once we're done with that. So 3 steps. Get the file, read the file, loop over the data, write files to the system. So let's start with number 1. Read the file. I think I have the tip in here. To read a file asynchronously, use fs read file. I'm going to, yeah. So again, fs read file. If you're in here, in the original documentation, you can just scroll down here and you see here sf read file. Now there are multiple read file options, as you might see. You have read file and read file sync. What is the major difference in here, I've asked during the theory, is the callback function. Very plainly said is that this file will return, this function will return the value, while this will return the value in the callback function. The code here is going to wait for sync. The code here is not going to wait. Code is going to continue. And in the callback function, we will have our data when it's done. So we're going to work with that again to train on asynchronous behavior. File system. How is the documentation of Node mostly built up? The parameters, as you can see, fs.readFile. This read file is the function. So fs is the library we get here. So fs.readFile. As you can see, I already get auto completion. Perfect. Read file. And then, just like we see on the left side with Visual Studio, on the right side, we see the read file documentation. What can I pass along? We can pass along the path, which is just the URL to the file. If it's in a folder, you need to put folder/. Now I placed it in the same place. I should just you do too. So board games here, boardgames.json. So it's on the same place. So that means I can do boardgames.json. Perfect. Easy. And of course, most people will just copy this. I'm just going to build it step by step, and then you will understand it better. The options, we don't need options yet. We need a file. We have the file, that's it. And we're going to do a callback function. The callback function itself has two properties. Oh my God, namings, Mike, namings. The function itself has 2 parameters, of course, parameters, error, and data. I cannot speak today, my gosh. More coffee. All right, so error and data. That means that if this function is called, if there is an error, which will be thrown by the file system, like if Windows or Mac, if Mac says, you cannot read from my drive because I'm Apple and you do not own your PC, then it will throw an error. I'm just joking, but not really. So it will automatically fill in these for you. Let's check it out. Board games, callback function. As you can see, let me check if I see. Maybe very good in Visual Studio Code. You have multiple ways of calling it here. You see read file, path. It can be a number, a string, a buffer, a URL, whatever you want. And then a callback function. You don't see the options here. It's because there are multiple versions of this, as you can see. So the options is, as you might have guessed it, optional. you do not need to add it to have a function, like a valid call. If I do this, this will crash because I do not have a callback function. Example, crash. Callback must be a function. There is no callback, so that's a very easy issue to solve. We're gonna add a callback function. I'm gonna give it the same name, so that, voila, callback function. Perfect. I'm going to automatically break it and see if this works. So, if, I'm just gonna type it over, but indeed, if the error is filled in, that's all you need to know. If it's filled in, I'm gonna throw it. I do not think you have had error handling. Can you type in chat and let me know if you had error handling in Dev 2 or you might have had already in Dev 3? Just in chat, please. Now, and I will console log the data. No error handling. Okay, perfect. Well, not perfect, but now I know what it does. Now, throw means it throws up an error. So if you have a catch statement, it will catch the error. You will learn this in Java, no doubt. And the same goes through here. We do not go deeper into this. If you need it, I will explain it during a session, maybe later in the course. But otherwise, just notice that this throw does this. Throw error, error, no such file or directory. It's a difference. Like this is an actual error that is thrown. It's like, okay, this is crashing, done. While a console log doesn't stop the code. A throw error is like throw it and stop it. Okay. This is a very easy way of throwing that error. You can catch that in a log file, for example, which is a very cool thing to do later, but for now it's okay. So we cannot find the file or directory. Of course not, because, and this is where you need to do your own searching on why this error breaks. Now, C, git, web2, session 4, board games JSON 1. I'm gonna check in my file system if that file is there. Of course, I know it's not there because there's a 1 behind it. I have boardgames.json. Now, most of you might do this, or do this, or do this, and have a completely faulty URL. URLs in file systems and in servers are a beast of their own, and you need to have some basics. For now, just make sure that you have them on the same place, so you don't have to mess with any of that. Because, as the hands indicated during the theory lessons, not a lot have had experience with terminals, let alone paths. So boardgames.jsons mean it's going to search for this file on the same place that the index.js is executed. That's all you need to know for now. If I do it now, okay. Again, think again. It does not crash, shows up first. And then it shows me some weird buffer. Of course, the buffer is this. So that means, again, the asynchronous nature. The code doesn't stop here. It starts reading the file, it console logs, and when the file is loaded into the memory, then it calls this. All right? Good. Now buffer. Buffer. And we do not want a buffer. We want a string, of course. Now, the answer is already on your screen. Only my face is hiding it. If we go down a bit. Again, read documentation. I cannot stress this enough. Some people start with this. They go to here. Okay, I got it. Oh, buffer. I don't know what to do now. Just keep going. Keep going. The callback is passing 2 arguments, error and data, where data is the content of the file. If no encoding is specified, again, encoding, what is encoding? Go back up, options, encoding. Okay, then the raw buffer is returned. Buffer. I know nothing about stream buffers, etc., but I know that if I see the word buffer here and buffer here, then I must logically assume that this is what's happening right now. I'm getting the raw buffer of that file. If options is a string, then it specifies the encoding. So if you know you're getting a string back, which I know it's a JSON file, I'm going to get a string, then I need to specify the encoding itself. UTF-8. Save. Et voila. We have a string. It does not crash, and then this. So this is the basic gist of how to work with that. I'm not gonna say I'm going to smack you around if you do not read documentation, but I'm still gonna say that you need to read documentation. Okay, so it's a very small thing. Let me check if there is something else. Let me check. Okay, I think that's all we need to know. Now, the last thing we need to do is make the data usable. Now, a string, we cannot work with a string. Why? Because this is a very big string. What I need is an object. If I have an object, I have properties. If I have properties, then I can go into that property for the value and stuff like that. So again, I gave you the solution already. To convert data from a string to a valid JavaScript object, use the JSON library. So the JSON library is fairly easy. For example, JSON. It's a JSON library. Dot. And it has two main things. Parse and stringify. And the one does the opposite of the other. Parse is make a string into a valid object so I can work with it. Stringify is, you might have guessed it, take an object, a valid JSON object, and convert it to a string. Which we will, spoiler, need to save the data back to the file. Because we can only save strings to a text file, not a JavaScript object. Okay? So, parse. Does it return? I think it returns. Yeah. Parse the data. And I'm going to let board games equals JSON parse data. Let's see what it throws back now. You might not notice a difference in the at first sight, but the one thing you should see, and I say this as a colorblind guy, everything is white when you print a string. If you go down, you see that it recognizes, the terminal recognizes a bit on what is an object, as in it notices that these are properties and that these are values. Okay, we got step one. Step two, loop over it. So now it's actually just step one, read the file. Step two, loop over data. And somewhere in there, step three, we need to save the file. Now, loop over data. Now it's just JavaScript again. That doesn't have anything to do with Node. Now it's just JavaScript. We need to loop over the data, and we need to save every board game. Now, what's the issue here? There is nothing to loop over. We have an object, we have properties, but it's not an array. Teacher, you gave us the wrong file. No, I did not. I gave you something so you can learn something else. You can loop over properties of an object. So you can loop over the different properties here and have it as value. Does anybody know with what kind of loop you can loop over an object to get different properties? Type it in chat. For object entries. Okay. I have not used object entries. Object entries. Returns an array of key values for the enumerable properties of an object. Okay, but that's an extra step, I think, because it returns the keys and then you have to work with. Mr. Legion. Yeah, Ricardo was first. For in. For in is a fairly easy one. Let me think. I'm gonna have the ID. It's an ID. That's why. In, and then board games. Let me just console log that. Just that. I am looping over board games, which you know is an object with 3 different properties. And the properties are dynamic. You do not know the properties by hand. If I give you another file with 1500 games, then you will need to dynamically loop over those. For each is not correct in the sense that for each you use on an iterable object and you will have different values. Like an object itself, a clean object, you cannot really loop over it cleanly. So with the for in, each iteration will add the value to ID. Now, and as you can see, we have the 3 IDs. Perfect, we have the IDs. So that means with some object magic, which you should have learned in Dev 2, we can access the value from that in here. So what if I said that let's board game, 1 game, I need the whole object. So for this, I need Terra Mystica. I need this object. So I have it ready to save to the file. Okay. Board game is board games. And then this. So square brackets allow for an object to, looking for the English word. It allows us to access the value of a property from what we do not know the name of. So I do not know if it's this ID, if it's this ID. Did 477? 677. So in some way, this would also work, but the thing is, we do not know, this is not handy because board games itself doesn't have that, it doesn't know the property. It only knows the property once you loop over it or once you parse it into it. So now that I have the dynamic property, the ID, I can grab the board game. So the value, this is basically the same as saying, for example, user.name or user.telephone. Telephone. I sound so old. God damn it. So it's basically the same, only that we do not know the properties. Okay. So I hope that's clear. That's a different way of accessing properties from an object. Now that I have the board game, again, check it. If it doesn't work, check it. Check it. Boom. And now it might look the same, but it does not crash. As you can see, start, end. This is Terra Mystica. Start, end is Gloomhaven. Start, end, it's Food Chain Magnet. It's weird that it has that order because Gloomhaven is at the end. Anyway, doesn't matter. So we have that. And of course, now that we have that, we can now save the file. That's about it. We save a file for each of those board games. I'm going to take some extra steps to make it clear. I'm going to dynamically create a file name because, like I said, every game needs a different file with a unique file name. What is that file name? It's the ID. The ID plus .json. So now, of course, the first file name will be 120.677.json. Perfect. And then in the exercise, it says you can use write file or append file. We're going to use write file. Append file is if it already exists, it's going to add. You can read the difference in there. And you know what? I'm going to use the synchronous version. Sync version. Why? Because otherwise I have another callback. But again, you do you. It's the same functionality. So let me check. Write file sync. Again, like it says, see the documentation for write file. Write file sync. Difference is that it returns undefined, but then the code just waits here until it's done writing. Otherwise, you have multiple callback functions. What do I need to pass along? The file name. I'm gonna go with this documentation. So like you see here, it's going to the file name or descriptor. Now file name is going to be file name, of course. It's going to have data. What needs to be in the file? Well, it needs to have my board game, but like I said, you can only save strings. So we are going to see if we can make that a string. Most people who paid attention, again, how do I make from this object, how do I make it a string? Type it in chat, please. Stringify, correct. So json.stringify. I'm going to take an object, any object, and I'm going to make a string from it. And this should do it. I think so. I don't know. Let's see. Save. Well, it does not crash. That is something. But of course, how do we check it? Bam. We have 3 new files. And now, of course, as you can see, 677, you see the 3 unique numbers. So Terra Mystica is in here. I assume Gloomhaven is in here. And here is Food Chain Magnet. Terra Mystica, as you might see, beautify, sorry. So perfect JSON file. Gloomhaven. Food Chain Magnet. We have our exercise. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. I will add the asynchronous function. Okay. The asynchronous function is a bit the same. Write file. Again, we take the file name. We take the board game. And we have a callback. And I think it only takes an error. Let me check. Only takes an error. And you can do a customized message, which is always fun to see. Voila. So what I did now, again, I'm going to test it out. I'm going to delete my files. Of course, if you keep testing, delete them. File something something has been saved. Has been saved successfully. Yay me. And now you see perfectly which files are saved. So you have a log for yourself. If you can write this into another file that has an actual log, perfect. This was the exercise. That's about it. So now I will, of course, provide this code later. It's very easy, it's very small. You can see both of them. This has a bit more meat on it because you need that callback function. How do you choose which one? If you can afford to wait for your code, you use the synchronous one. If you need to do something else when the file is successfully saved, like give a notification to a user, save it on a different place, like a cloud storage, for example, then you use this function. It's better that way because if it has consequences, you do not know how long it could take. There could be issues, etc. Error handling is also much easier here. Of course, throwing just an error up and making your program crash is not the ideal way, but again, you will see error handling in Dev 3. I am sure of it. If not, then I'm going to talk to the teacher. No worries about that. You know what? I'm in a good mood. Let's start exercise 3 as well. We still have some time. Folder. Exercise 3. Exercise 2. Boom, boom, boom. Any questions in the meantime? All right. Exercise 3. We don't need that. Okay. Okay. Exercise 3. Good. Exercise 3, Node and Axios. So everybody knows how to make API calls. Now we're going to make API calls from Node. It's the same. You can also use fetch, I assume. I think so, yeah. You can also use fetch, but we're going to use a different package for that. One that has been used or is being used for lots of frameworks. Okay, so let's dive in. Step A. Step A. Create a new folder in session 4 called exercise 3. I have done that. Again, I make this sound silly, but not a lot of you, if you have issues, read the whole thing. Like literally every step should be in there. If it's not, it's my mistake. Navigate with your terminal in your editor to the correct folder, which is something most of you forget. So I'm in session 4 here. Let me check. I'm in session 4. So that means that CD exercise 3. And now I am in exercise 3. Okay, perfect. To start a clean new npm project, we use the following command, npm init. I showed that in the demo earlier. It's basically a walkthrough on, just gonna close this, package name. You can enter. I'm going to cancel because I'm so pro that I can let it, oh my gosh. And of course it crashes immediately after I say that I'm so pro. Invalid name, of course. Bad practice. Do not use spaces in your file names, in your folder names. Why? Because it tends to give issues with stuff. Yeah, F's in the chat. Never mind. I can pivot. Done. Okay. Normally now, npm init -y. Done. -y creates a default package. Just like default names, default version, no author, doesn't need it. So you can immediately start. So it's quicker that way. Okay, we have our npm JSON. Okay. Follow the instructions in your terminal. If in doubt, just leave the input blank, which is what we did. We left basically everything blank and let npm do it. If all worked out well, you now have a package.json file. We have. Okay. Here the dependencies are added and all the metadata is stored. Metadata. Good. B, add the Axios package. We're going to start that and we're going to do a very small exercise. I'm not going to finish everything, so you can do some stuff as well. But again, add the Axios package. npm install Axios save. I know that because if I go to the Axios documentation, of course, every time install npm I is the shortcut. Install is also good. You see if you scroll down here, installing npm install Axios. Save adds it to the JSON file normally. Okay. And as you can see, now we have node modules. We have our folders, so it's okay. We have our package.json. What what do we not have? We do not have a file, a JavaScript file to test it out. So if everything looks good, you can now use the function of Axios in your script. Create a new file, emails.js. And now I don't need this anymore. Emails.js. And use the required keyword to load Axios into your script. Another best practice is calling, except for Lodash, is calling your variable the same name as your package. Why? Because it's easily recognizable. If you just use A and you have another package also used with that starts with an A, it can get very confusing very easily. You will see that throughout the internet that most of the examples use the same name for the variable as does the package. And then of course, step 3, which is step C, which is the ones you're gonna do. Now, you're going to combine the previous logic of saving files and working with data. The only difference now is that in exercise 2, we got a JSON file that we have on our computer. Now we will get JSON data from the internet, which is just the same as a fetch, but now we're going to do it with Axios. And then you're going to create a new file with all the emails for comments. Example. So JSON placeholder, again, example, API, very good place to test. 500. I like that. So 500 comments, random comments, it's fake comments. What does it have? Post ID, ID, name, and email. Now, what do I want you to do? I want to gather all the emails that are in all those comments, and those emails I want stored in a JSON file. The JSON file should look like this. I'm going to up it a bit. So just a JSON file, of course, starts and ends with brackets. It's Team Tris, of course. It has one property, emails, and it has an array. Okay. I want to finish it because it's so easy. Axios. Let's do a simple example get request. As you can see, make a request to something, a get request. You have multiple functions in here. Let me check. This is new documentation. Async await, you can also perfectly use. I'm going to do some, let me check. It's a dummy code, okay? So Axios get, of course, the enters make it look like a bit weirder. Voila. So we have success, errors. Now I'm going to add the URL. This is the URL, which means if I can enter it into my browser and I get back all this, that means that I can add it here as well and console log my response. Emails. Oops. Lots of data and 400 more items. As you might see, what is the thing that we do not have to do here that we did in the previous exercise? What immediately sticks out to you when you see this in the console? We are getting JSON data, but of course it's also just a string, basically. You do not have to parse. Why not? Why do you not have to parse? Correct, there is no parsing, but why do you not have to parse? Because Axios is an awesome library. Simple as that. That's why you use packages. The get Axios, so a couple of answers in the chat says it's already an array. Correct, but it's also just a string. It's just JSON data. And the get request from Axios already transforms it into a valid JSON object before it hands it to you in the response. So here, in this response. I'm just going to. Axios automatically converts that. You do not have to do that automatically. Okay, so again, if you get an error, I will do this. That URL doesn't exist. Let's see if I enter it in here. What do I get? I get nothing. Okay. I was hoping that, yeah, this is of course a test API, so I was hoping that it generates an error, but good. Now we have that response, so we already have the data. Now it's up to you that if it's successful, create one file, and that's very important. That's why I gave you a list of 500 items, because if it goes wrong now, you're gonna create a lot of files. And take the email out of it. So is it email? Unexpected end of input. Do I have an issue somewhere? What is this? What is this? Hold on a second. I do not like these functions. That's one. That's then the catch. Why do I not have a catch? Or why? What does it give you? I have somewhere an issue. Let me check. After 7. Yes, correct. Correct, thank you. After argument list. God damn it. Yeah, of course. It should have this one. That's the response for each. And then, of course, I need this curly, this bracket. Okay. Of course, a good tip as well is beautify. It will automatically indent, but this should be good. I get, of course, I get a very big error back. For each is not a function. It will not recognize that as a. Again, testing it out. For each of undefined. Okay. No, it doesn't work on objects. I know, but it should have. My raw data is an array. So let me check. What do I get back? Type of response. And this is bug fixing it. So it's an object. I should be able to cast that to an array. Let me think. Convert an object into an array. Yeah, that's not what I want though. That is not what I want. No, for in doesn't work because it's not a those are not properties. As you can see, what I get back is I get back an array. Maybe I do need to parse it. I get back an array. So I have the solution somewhere because I've already made it. I just yeah, no. Let's see. It's something banal. I'm just forgetting it. Parse will have no. I think it will have no effect because this is not a string, I think. An unexpected token O in JSON. Okay. Let me think. Parse doesn't work. Oh, I know. I think I know. Yep. Okay. Hold on. Axios gives more data back. I should have used the console log better. It's because I'm working at such a high resolution that it's kind of hard to see constantly. Give me a second. I think it's in data. What I mean by that is it looks like I only get the data back, which is not true. If you scrolled up, if I'm not mistaken, come on, see? It has more data in it, like more extra info. And the array only starts in data, the data property. So if I do this, data, then I have an array. Silly me. Silly goose. Again, documentation, read it. And now you see that I immediately have my array. Done. And now we can finish, for example, all this silly code. We know that it's an array in .data. And I think that this should work. He said while waiting for an error. Voila, we got all the emails. And now it's up to you to save it in a file. This is the end of the coding along session. As you, like I said, coding along is failing and trying to work out those fails because you need to be able to find those errors yourself. We found them because I remembered. Again, if you did more console logs like I should have done, then you should have noticed that data. Okay, that's about it. I'm going to check. It's a bit misleading, which is silly because the raw data that I get back here. This is why I was confused. Is that the raw data you get back is just the JSON data, so just a string. But it's Axios who adds way more data, so you can work with more stuff. Like Axios adds way more things. But I assume that if I look at the Axios documentation, then it will say that the data is stored in data. Let me check. Is it somewhere in here? Ah, voilà, kijk. Post request non-data, dus to send post request, response data pipe. Yeah, okay. There's some more stuff as well. Good. All right. Thank you for the attention. Of course, this will be edited a bit and then added to the Web2 playlist. I bid you all adieu and have a good day. Thank you.